but it's a measurement that the activity is robust while we sleep in our dreaming brains.
Is there any merit to the viewpoint that if certain parts of our brain are more active when we are asleep, and in particular when we're dreaming, are those the same areas that might be, I guess, less active, and then you could argue resting during the day? Because can we have an organ that's going
hot all the time?
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, perfect question. I had this conversation with my son, and he says that it's a great question because, wait a second, you're saying waking brain and dreaming brain are both active, both hot, but you're also saying that certain parts are dampened, certain regions are dampened. So then how can they be even? So just bear with me there. The waking brain, and these are established neuroscience concepts. This what I'm about to say is well known in neuroscience. The waking brain is executive network dominant. The executive network is a collection of structures throughout the brain, from evolutionary old parts of the brain like the reptilian brain to the modern parts of the brain like the prefrontal cortex that have pushed our foreheads forward. They're all connected, but they provide a certain function. Much like if we talked about finance, there would be different parts of London and UK, but they would all function as a finance industry. Well, the executive network is the dominant network while we're awake. It's focused on what's called task on. It's looking for things to do outside. It's using reason. It's using logic. That makes sense. When we go from waking brain to dreaming brain, this is a measurement, the executive network is dampened. Okay. So then if things are robust equally, then something must be heightened in the dreaming brain. And that's the point you're getting to. And that's really where the magic in my mind and beauty of dreaming is, that it's what compensates for the dampened executive network is the limbic system, which is emotional networks, as well as the imagination network, which other people call default mode network, but I call it the imagination network. So you have a hyper emotional, hyper visual dreaming brain, and you have dampened logic in the dreaming brain. Now, the massive point here, another measurement, is the degree to which emotions, not in every dream, not in your dream or not in my dream, but in some dreams, the top speed of emotions in the dreaming brain is higher than what we could ever feel emotionally in our waking brain. Right. And that's an fMRI measurement of metabolic usage. So
just explain fMRI for people who don't know what that is.
So when we talk, and while we're here is because for the first time in the last 20 years, we have exotic brain imaging that's giving us a glimpse into dreaming that we never had before. Aristotle's talking about it 2,000 years ago. Everybody's curious about it. But so when I say measurements, there are three essential measurements of brain function we have now. fMRI is, there's no radiation with it. So, when my wife was pregnant and she needed some imaging, she had an MRI. So neuroscientists can recruit people to study them without injuring them. So that's why you're hearing that word quite a bit. An MRI it's a functional MRI. And when you perform a task, the slight changes in blood flow, the connection being that if these regions are more actively engaged in that task, they'll have a little bit more trickle of blood flow. So fMRI looks at metabolic usage in some sense through blood flow. Then the other thing we should know is you can measure electricity with scalp electrodes called an EEG. What I try to tell people is think of it, we put an electrode on the heart and that's an EKG. We all get that, right? That little classic squiggle.
Yeah.
What if we put 96 on our scalp? You'll record something else. So those two, I think, are the essential studies we're using to understand dreaming and to understand waking brain, because there's no conversation without having an understanding of both. And then the last thing is patient stories, things you understand too. Yeah. Like you can't not include the fact that on some rare exotic surgeries where we remove half the brain in a child,